Did you know that the Colorado River, one of the most iconic waterways in all of North America, no longer reaches the ocean? For decades, this mighty river carved through rock for over 2,000 miles, yet today it disappears into dry sand before ever touching the sea. Did you know that the river supplies fresh water to over 40 million people, irrigates nearly 6 million acres of farmland, and yet scientists have been sounding the alarm that it could functionally collapse within our lifetimes? And here's the part that almost nobody talks about. The river that built the American Southwest as we know it is being drained, divvied up, and fought over based on agreements made over a century ago. Agreements written when nobody understood how little water actually flows through it. Everything you think you know about the Colorado River is wrong. The myths, the legends, the legal frameworks, the assumptions, almost all of it built on sand, just like the riverbed itself. So today we are going deep. 32 wild facts about the Colorado River. Facts that sound made up. Facts that rewrite history. Facts that will make you see the American West in a completely different light. Let us start counting down. Fact number 32. The river was named for the wrong color. You have probably heard the name Colorado and assumed it has something to do with the state, but the name actually came first, and it described the river itself. Early Spanish explorers traveling through the region in the 1500s called it Rio Colorado, which translates roughly to red-colored river. They were describing the reddish-brown sediment that churned through the water. The thing is, that rusty color was largely a product of the Colorado Plateau's geology. Millions of tons of red sandstone and iron-rich sediment being carried downstream. Here is the twist. After the construction of Hoover Dam in the 1930s and Glen Canyon Dam in the 1960s, most of that sediment was trapped behind reservoirs. The river downstream actually runs a somewhat greenish, or clear blue-green color today in many stretches. The feature that gave the river its name, and by extension gave the entire state its name, is largely gone. The river is no longer red. The name is a monument to something that was erased. Fact number 31. The Grand Canyon is only about 5 to 6 million years old, which is geologically brand new. When people stand at the rim of the Grand Canyon, they feel like they are looking at something eternal. The rocks exposed at the bottom are nearly 2 billion years old, which is staggering. But the canyon itself, the actual carved void in the landscape, is relatively young in geological terms. Research published by scientists at the University of Colorado and other institutions suggests the canyon reached its current approximate form only in the last 5 to 6 million years. In the sweep of Earth's history, that is practically last Tuesday. What makes this fact truly dizzying is the implication. The Colorado River carved through over a mile of solid rock in what is, geologically speaking, a brief moment. The cutting happened fast. Some researchers believe the river accelerated its downcutting during periods of more intense flow tied to ice age climate shifts. Something that looks eternal was actually made in a geological sprint. Fact number 30. More than 90% of the river's original flow never reaches the Gulf of California anymore. Here's a fact that should be headline news every single day, but somehow gets buried. The Colorado River once emptied into the Gulf of California in Mexico with tremendous force. It built a massive delta, a rich, biodiverse wetland that covered over 2 million acres. Today, because of dams, irrigation diversions, and municipal water withdrawals, the river effectively dies in the desert before crossing into Mexico in most years. The delta is now largely a dry wasteland. Some limited restoration efforts have pushed small pulses of water through in recent years, most notably in 2014 when a planned experimental flow temporarily reached the sea. But the baseline reality is that one of North America's great rivers has been sucked dry. Over 90% of its natural flow is consumed before it ever sees the ocean. The delta ecosystem that once supported incredible biodiversity, including the vaquita porpoise, now the world's most critically endangered marine mammal, has been essentially destroyed. Fact number 29. The law that governs the entire river was based on a catastrophically wrong number. This one is fundamental to understanding everything else about the Colorado River's crisis. In 1922, representatives from 7 American states gathered to negotiate the Colorado River Compact. They needed to divide the river's water among the states. The problem is, the number they used to represent the river's average annual flow was wrong. Badly. Catastrophically wrong. They used approximately 17.5 million acre-feet per year as their baseline, but hydrologists now understand that the years they measured were among the wettest in the region's recent history. Long-term tree ring studies, which allow scientists to reconstruct historical river flows going back centuries, suggest the river's true long-term average flow is closer to 13 to 14 million acre-feet per year, and possibly even less under current warming conditions. They allocated more water than the river actually carries. Every drop of that miscalculation has been accumulating as a debt for over 100 years, and it is now coming due. Fact number 28. 7 states and 2 countries fight over this one river. The Colorado River Basin spans parts of Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and California in the United States, and also flows into the Mexican state of Baja California. The 1922 compact divided the river between an upper basin, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico, and a lower basin, Nevada, Arizona, and California. Mexico was later given a share through a treaty in 1944. So you have 7 American states and 2 nations, all with legal claims to water from a single river system. California alone is allocated over 4 million acre-feet per year, more than any other entity. That is a staggering dependency. Add to this the sovereign water rights of dozens of Native American tribes, some of the oldest and most legally powerful water rights in the entire system, and you have one of the most legally complex water governance situations on the planet. All of it hanging on a river that is now consistently flowing less than the law demands to exist. Fact number 27. Lake Mead losing water has revealed dark secrets. Lake Mead, the reservoir created by Hoover Dam on the Nevada-Arizona border, is the largest reservoir in the United States by volume when full. But since the early 2000s, it has been losing water at an alarming rate due to drought and overuse. By 2022, the lake had dropped to roughly 27% of its total capacity. And as the waterline fell, it began exposing things that had been hidden for decades. Human remains were found, multiple sets. A sunken World War II-era landing craft used for training exercises was revealed. Old structures, roads, and ghost town remnants from the communities that were flooded when the dam was built in the 1930s began to reappear. Archaeologists scrambled to document and recover artifacts and human remains before the water could potentially rise and resubmerge them. The shrinking lake became an accidental time capsule, opening a window into both mid-20th century history and ancient human habitation in the desert. Fact number 26. Hoover Dam generates enough electricity to power about 1.3 million homes. When Hoover Dam was completed in 1935, ahead of schedule and under budget remarkably, it was the largest dam in the world. Standing at 726 feet tall and containing over 3 million cubic yards of concrete, it was an engineering monument. The hydroelectric power plant at the dam has a generating capacity of about 2,074 megawatts. In practical terms, that is enough electricity to supply approximately 1.3 million homes in the surrounding region. Power from Hoover Dam is allocated among Nevada, Arizona, and the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Here is a fact that adds a layer of irony. As Lake Mead's water level has dropped, so has the dam's ability to generate power. In 2021 and 2022, the dam was producing power at historically reduced levels because there was not enough water pressure at the intake structures to run the turbines at full capacity. The dam's power output is directly tied to how full the reservoir is. The drought is not just a water crisis, it is also becoming an energy crisis. Now, before we go further, and we are barely halfway through, I want to ask you something. Did any of these facts surprise you? because we are about to go deeper into territory that the mainstream conversation about the Colorado River almost never touches. If you are not subscribed yet, this is the moment. Hit that button and the notification bell, because the next batch of facts gets into history, catastrophe, and the kind of stuff that rewrites the map. Let us keep going. This is where the Colorado River stops being strange and starts being haunting. Fact number 25. The river once flooded and accidentally created an entire inland sea. In 1905, one of the most spectacular engineering failures in American history turned a desert into an inland sea. Irrigation canals had been cut from the Colorado River to water the farms of California's Imperial Valley. During an unusually wet season, the river flooded and broke through the irrigation canal headgates. For the next 16 months, from 1905 to 1907, the entire flow of the Colorado River diverted into the Imperial Valley and began filling the Salton Sink, a low-lying desert depression that had once been part of the Gulf of California. The result was the Salton Sea, a body of water roughly 35 miles long and 15 miles wide. It took the combined efforts of the Southern Pacific Railroad, which had enormous financial interest in the valley, and massive emergency engineering work to finally redirect the river back to its natural course. The Salton Sea exists today, though it has become increasingly saline and ecologically troubled. It was born from an accident that lasted a year and a half. Fact number 24. Ancient Native American civilizations built irrigation systems along the river over 1,000 years ago. Long before the Bureau of Reclamation and its massive 20th-century dams and canals, sophisticated indigenous civilizations were engineering the Colorado River and its tributaries. The Hohokam people of what is now southern Arizona constructed hundreds of miles of irrigation canals beginning around 300 Common Era and continuing through approximately 1400 Common Era. These were not primitive ditches. Some of the canals were 30 feet wide and 10 feet deep, moving water across enormous distances with remarkable precision. Archaeologists from Arizona State University and other institutions have mapped canal systems totaling over 1,000 miles in the Phoenix Basin alone. The Hohokam supported populations of tens of thousands through desert agriculture made possible by this engineering. Their civilization eventually declined with drought and salt buildup in the soil among the suspected causes, centuries before Europeans arrived. In a profound and somewhat humbling historical echo, the descendants of these engineers are still here, and their tribal water rights are now among the most legally senior in the entire Colorado River system. Fact number 23. Glen Canyon, one of the most spectacular landscapes ever discovered, was drowned on purpose. If you've never heard of Glen Canyon, that is exactly the point. In the 1950s and early 1960s, the Bureau of Reclamation proposed building a dam on the Colorado River in southern Utah. The canyon it would flood was described by those who explored it as one of the most beautiful places in North America, a labyrinth of sculpted sandstone, hidden side canyons, natural arches, and quiet pools. Explorer and writer Wallace Stegner called it a portion of Earth's original paradise. The dam was built anyway. Glen Canyon Dam was completed in 1966, and Lake Powell began filling. The canyon, hundreds of miles of it, was drowned. The Sierra Club, which had fought an earlier dam proposal at Dinosaur National Monument and won, is widely considered to have made a tragic strategic error in agreeing not to fight Glen Canyon's flooding as part of that compromise. The drowning of Glen Canyon became a defining wound for the American environmental movement. Today, with Lake Powell at historic low levels, portions of the original canyon are reappearing. The ghost of Glen Canyon is rising from the water. Fact number 22. The river's delta was once one of the most biodiverse ecosystems in North America. Before dams and diversions transformed the lower Colorado River, the delta region at the river's mouth in Mexico was a stunning ecological mosaic. Naturalist Aldo Leopold paddled through it in 1922, just weeks before the Colorado River Compact was signed, and described a wilderness of cottonwood and willow teeming with wildlife. He wrote about jaguars, deer, and massive flocks of birds. The delta supported rich fish populations, unique plant communities, and indigenous communities who had lived there for thousands of years. Within a few decades of major water diversions beginning, the delta had transformed from wetland paradise to desert wasteland. The wetlands contracted by over 90%. The fish species adapted to the delta's unique mix of fresh and salt water were devastated. The Kukap people, who had fished and farmed the delta for generations, lost their entire way of life. Leopold later revisited the delta and wrote of its death with grief. That experience contributed to his development of the land ethic, one of the foundational philosophies of modern environmentalism. Fact number 21. The Colorado River supplies water to some of the driest cities on Earth. Las Vegas, Nevada receives an average of only about 4 inches of rain per year, making it one of the driest major cities in the United States. Yet it supports a metropolitan population of approximately 2.2 million people, runs hundreds of hotel fountains, maintains golf courses, and hosts some of the most water-intensive hospitality infrastructure on the planet. How? The Colorado River. About 90% of Las Vegas's water supply comes from Lake Mead. Phoenix, Arizona, another desert megacity with over 5 million people in its metro area, also relies heavily on Colorado River water. Los Angeles, which receives somewhat more rainfall but still operates in a semi-arid climate, draws on Colorado River water via the 442-mile-long Colorado River Aqueduct, completed in 1941. These cities could not exist at their current size without the river. The entire urban civilization of the American Southwest is built on water flowing from mountains in Wyoming and Colorado, and that flow is now measurably declining. Fact number 20. The most powerful man-made flood in recent American history was engineered on purpose in the Grand Canyon. In 1996, the United States government deliberately opened the floodgates at Glen Canyon Dam and sent a massive surge of water roaring through the Grand Canyon. The controlled flood released about 45,000 cubic feet of water per second for a week. Scientists wanted to test whether artificial floods could restore some of the ecological functions that natural flooding once provided. Before the dam, the Colorado River flooded seasonally, depositing sandbars, stirring up sediment, and reshaping the riverbed. After the dam, those floods stopped, and the river's ecosystem inside the Grand Canyon began to deteriorate. Sandbars eroded. Native fish declined. The controlled flood experiment showed mixed results. Sandbars temporarily rebuilt, but many eroded again quickly. Subsequent high-flow experiments were conducted in 2004, 2008, and periodically since then. Researchers from the United States Geological Survey have monitored these experiments closely. The science is ongoing, but the basic reality is stark. We have to artificially simulate what a natural river used to do for free. Fact number 19. There is a military connection to the Colorado River that most people have never heard of. During World War II, the United States Army established several major facilities tied to the Colorado River region. One of the most significant was the Colorado River Relocation Center, also known as the Poston-War Relocation Center, located on the Colorado River Indian Reservation in western Arizona. It was one of the largest Japanese-American internment camps established by the federal government following Executive Order 9066 in 1942. At its peak, Poston housed over 17,000 Japanese-American internees, making it the third largest city in Arizona at the time. The bitterly ironic detail: the facility was built on land belonging to the Colorado River Indian tribes, who had not consented to its establishment. The Army essentially occupied tribal land to intern American citizens. The tribes protested but were overruled. The Colorado River Indian tribes only received formal recognition of some tribal water rights through hard-fought legal battles that continued for decades after the war ended. Fact number 18. The river's sediment starvation is collapsing beaches inside the Grand Canyon. This is one of those facts that reveals how deeply interconnected a river system really is. The Colorado River historically carried enormous loads of sediment, sand, silt, and clay, downstream from the Rocky Mountains and Colorado Plateau. This sediment built and maintained the beaches, sandbars, and habitat features inside the Grand Canyon. Glen Canyon Dam, built just above the canyon, acts as an almost perfect sediment trap. Nearly 100% of the sediment that would naturally flow into the canyon is now captured behind the dam. The river that exits the dam runs clear, beautiful to look at, ecologically devastating. Without incoming sediment, the canyon's beaches have been gradually eroding. Scientists estimate that the volume of sand stored in the Grand Canyon has declined dramatically since the dam was built. The beaches that hikers and river runners camp on are slowly disappearing. Restoration efforts involve timing high-flow experiments when tributaries naturally deliver sediment to push it into the canyon, but the tributaries carry far less sediment than the main river historically did. Fact number 17. The Colorado River Compact left Native American tribes completely out of the negotiations. In 1922, when representatives from 7 states sat down to divide the Colorado River, not a single Native American nation was invited to participate. This is not a small omission. Tribes throughout the Colorado River Basin had inhabited the region for thousands of years and had established water rights that, under the legal doctrine known as the Winters Doctrine, established by a Supreme Court ruling in 1908, were legally senior to most state water rights. By excluding tribes from the compact entirely, the negotiating states effectively tried to pretend those rights did not exist. For most of the 20th century, tribes were unable to develop or access their legal water entitlements due to lack of infrastructure funding and active political resistance. Over the past several decades, a series of tribal water settlements, negotiated individually with Congress, have begun to recognize those rights. The Navajo Nation, which borders the Colorado River and whose reservation was carved from the river basin, went decades without formal federal recognition of its Colorado River water rights, even as its members hauled water by truck. The 1922 Compact's exclusion of indigenous peoples created a water injustice that is still being slowly, imperfectly corrected today. I want to pause here and be honest with you about something personal. I grew up in the American Southwest. I drank Colorado River water as a kid, without ever really thinking about where it came from, who fought over it, or what had been sacrificed to move it to my tap. Researching the facts in this video genuinely changed how I think about the landscape I grew up in. That shift, that moment when the familiar becomes strange and then becomes something more honest, is exactly why I think stories like this matter. Fact number 16. A single irrigation district in California uses more Colorado River water than all of Nevada. The Imperial Irrigation District in California's Imperial Valley is one of the largest irrigation districts in the United States. Under the Colorado River Compact and subsequent agreements, California holds the largest single-state allocation of Colorado River water, over 4 million acre-feet per year. A huge portion of that allocation goes to the Imperial Irrigation District, which irrigates approximately 500,000 acres of desert farmland. The district uses roughly 3.1 million acre-feet per year, more water annually than the entire state of Nevada receives from the river. The Imperial Valley produces enormous quantities of vegetables and other crops for national consumption, which is economically significant. But it also uses water at rates and with efficiencies that have been contested for decades. Water rights negotiations between the Imperial Irrigation District, the City of San Diego, the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, and the federal government over conserving and redistributing this allocation became one of the most contentious water policy battles in the region's recent history. Fact number 15. The river has gone dry near its mouth for decades, devastating a unique ecosystem. Since the 1960s, the Colorado River has failed to reach the Gulf of California in most years. The river simply disappears. It soaks into sand and gravel beds in the northern Mexican desert, consumed by agriculture and evaporation before it can travel the last miles to the sea. The ecological consequences in the Delta region have been catastrophic. The totoaba, a large fish endemic to the Gulf of California that once spawned in the Colorado River Delta's brackish shallows, is now critically endangered. The vaquita marina, the world's smallest porpoise, found only in the northern Gulf of California near the river's former mouth, has declined to a population estimated at fewer than 10 individuals as of recent surveys. While the vaquita's primary threat is illegal fishing gear set for totoaba, The collapse of the delta ecosystem created by river diversion removed the ecological foundation that the entire northern Gulf food web depended upon. International conservation groups have called the vaquita's extinction trajectory one of the most preventable ecological disasters in the world. Preventable if the political will existed to change how the river is managed. Fact number 14. Lake Powell is so large it took 17 years to fill and is now losing that water rapidly. When Glen Canyon Dam was completed in 1966 and the gates were closed, the filling of Lake Powell began. The reservoir stretches for approximately 186 miles through the canyons of southern Utah and northern Arizona, and at full capacity holds approximately 26.2 million acre-feet of water. The reservoir stretches for approximately 186 miles through the canyons of southern Utah and northern Arizona, and at full capacity holds approximately 26.2 million acre-feet of water, enough to supply the entire United States population for over a year. Because the canyon system it fills is so vast and labyrinthine, the lake took approximately 17 years to reach its full pool level, not reaching that milestone until 1980. Then, drought arrived. Beginning around 2000, the lake began dropping. By 2022, it had fallen to about 24% of capacity. The dam's hydroelectric generators were at risk of going offline entirely, a condition the Bureau of Reclamation calls dead pool, if the water fell below the intake pipes. Emergency agreements between the basin states were hammered out in 2023 to prevent the most catastrophic scenarios. The reservoir that took 17 years to fill lost the majority of its water in roughly 2 decades of drought. Fact number 13. The river's name appears on the oldest surviving map of the American interior. Spanish exploration of the southwestern interior began in the 1500s, driven by legends of cities of gold. In 1540, conquistador Francisco Vázquez de Coronado sent a small detachment led by Garcia López de Cardenas northward from the main expedition. Cardenas and his men became the first Europeans recorded to have seen the Grand Canyon and were stopped cold by it. They could see the river far below, but could not descend. Meanwhile, Hernando de Alarcón navigated the lower Colorado River from its mouth in the Gulf of California in the same year, becoming the first European to travel up the river itself. The accounts of these expeditions and the rivers they described were incorporated into early maps of the continent. The Colorado River, under various names and in wildly distorted forms, appears on maps of New Spain from the mid-1500s onward, making it one of the earliest mapped rivers in all of North America's interior. The geography was barely understood, but the river was already being recorded. Fact number 12. The Bureau of Reclamation once seriously proposed damming the Grand Canyon itself. In the 1960s, as the Bureau of Reclamation was completing its plans for what became the Central Arizona Project, a massive canal system to move Colorado River water to Phoenix and Tucson, it proposed building not one, but 2 dams inside the Grand Canyon. The Marble Canyon Dam and the Bridge Canyon Dam would have flooded stretches of the canyon to generate the electricity needed to pump water uphill through the Central Arizona Project. The Sierra Club, led by Executive Director David Brower, launched a famous national advertising campaign opposing the dams, including full-page newspaper advertisements that asked Americans if we also want to flood the Sistine Chapel so tourists can get closer to the ceiling. The backlash was enormous. The dams were never built. The Sierra Club's tax-exempt status was temporarily revoked by the Internal Revenue Service in apparent retaliation for its political lobbying, which the Sierra Club publicly celebrated as proof that the campaign had worked. The Central Arizona Project was ultimately powered by coal-fired electricity from the Navajo Generating Station instead, which created its own set of environmental and tribal complications. Fact number 11. The river passes through 5 different desert ecosystems. The Colorado River is remarkable for traversing an almost unmatched range of ecological zones along its roughly 1,450 miles. At its headwaters in Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado, the river begins as a cold mountain stream in subalpine meadows. It then flows through the Great Basin Desert, the Colorado Plateau, the Sonoran Desert, and ultimately, when it had water enough to do so, through the Delta and into the Gulf of California. Each zone has its own distinct flora, fauna, temperature regime, and precipitation pattern. The river connects snowpack in the Rockies to desert fish, to migratory birds, to coastal marine ecosystems. It is less a single river than a biological corridor linking vastly different worlds. This ecological connectivity is part of what makes the river's degradation so wide-reaching. Disrupting one section does not just harm that section. It breaks the corridor for species that depend on the entire length. Fact number 10. The river's water is so heavily consumed that the water you drink in Los Angeles might have been used multiple times upstream. The Colorado River is what water managers call a fully allocated river. Every drop is legally promised to someone before it ever falls as rain. In the lower basin, particularly in the Imperial Valley and along the Arizona Canal systems, agricultural water that drains off fields is captured, treated, and reused downstream. The water cycle of the lower Colorado is so heavily managed that what began as mountain snowmelt in Wyoming has often passed through multiple uses: irrigation, municipal systems, evaporation, and return flows before it reaches its final destination. Scientists studying the isotopic signatures of water in different parts of the system have traced these complex journeys. When Phoenix or Las Vegas residents turn on their taps, the water in their glass has a history that might span thousands of miles and years of storage. A river that appears natural on a map is, in practice, an almost entirely artificial infrastructure system by the time it reaches most of its users. Fact number 9. Drought conditions in the basin may be permanent, not a temporary weather cycle. This is the fact that climate scientists have been documenting with increasing certainty over the past decade. The severe drought that has gripped the Colorado River Basin since approximately 2000 is not simply a natural drought cycle that will eventually reverse. Research published in the journal Science in 2022, analyzing tree rings, streamflow data, and climate modeling, characterized current conditions as a mega-drought, the worst the region has experienced in at least 1,200 years. More concerning, researchers from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography and other institutions have documented that even in years with normal precipitation, the river carries less water than it did historically because higher temperatures are increasing evapotranspiration, plants and soils absorbing and releasing more water before it ever reaches the river. Warming temperatures in the basin have reduced the river's flow by roughly 10 to 15% compared to the 20th century average, and that trend is projected to worsen. What was called a drought may actually be the new baseline. The river of the past century may already be a historical artifact. Fact number 8. The Colorado River Compact has never been successfully renegotiated in over 100 years. The 1922 Compact, signed by representatives of 7 states on November 24, 1922, remains the foundational legal document governing the river today. In over a century, despite everything that has changed, population growth, climate change, ecological knowledge, tribal water rights recognition, the drying of the delta, the near failure of 2 major reservoirs, the basic framework of the compact has never been fundamentally renegotiated. There have been additions, amendments, and agreements layered on top of it. The Upper Colorado River Compact of 1948, the Colorado River Basin Project Act of 1968, a series of drought contingency plans negotiated after 2000, but the underlying architecture, with its catastrophically wrong flow assumption built in, endures. Every negotiation runs into the same problem. Any reduction in one state's allocation is a loss that state's politicians cannot survive. The ghost of 1922 haunts every water meeting in the American West, and nobody has yet figured out how to lay it to rest. Fact number 7. The river's tributaries include one of the most dangerous rivers in the world for flash floods. The Paria River, the Dirty Devil, the Little Colorado, the Virgin River, the Colorado's tributaries are themselves storied and complex. But the subject of flash floods in canyon country along these tributaries deserves specific attention. The geology of the Colorado Plateau creates ideal conditions for catastrophic flash flooding. Rain falls on impermeable rock surfaces over vast areas and funnels into narrow slot canyons with no warning. Water can rise dozens of feet in minutes in canyons where hikers see blue sky above them and have no awareness of a storm miles away. One of the deadliest flash floods in American National Park history occurred in 1997 in Antelope Canyon, a famous slot canyon tributary of Lake Powell near Page, Arizona, when a guided tour group was swept away by a sudden flood. 11 people died. The canyon had been dry minutes before the water arrived. Flash flooding in the Slot Canyon country of the Colorado River system remains one of the leading causes of death in the American Southwest's backcountry. The beauty and the danger are inseparable in this landscape. Fact number 6. Ancient rock art along the river tells a story that science is still decoding. The Colorado River and its canyon system contain one of the greatest concentrations of rock art, petroglyphs carved into stone and pictographs painted on it in the entire Western Hemisphere. Thousands of sites have been documented by archaeologists along the river and its tributaries. Some of the oldest images date back to possibly 6,000 or 8,000 years ago. The styles range from the abstract geometric patterns of the Archaic period to the recognizable human figures and animal images left by human figures and animal images left by ancestral Puebloans, Fremont people, Ute, and Navajo artists. What makes this rock art particularly remarkable is how much of it we still do not understand. Some panels clearly depict astronomical events, ancestral Puebloans, Fremont people, Ute, and Navajo artists. What makes this rock art particularly remarkable is how much of it we still do not understand. Some panels clearly depict astronomical events, spirals used as solar calendars, images interpreted as supernova records. Others remain entirely opaque to researchers. The river was not just a physical resource for the peoples who lived along it. It was a spiritual and cultural axis, and the canyon walls were their libraries and cathedrals. With the rising and falling of reservoir waters, some panels have been submerged and others re-exposed, and the race to document them before they are lost again is ongoing. Fact number 5. A single water deal in 2003 reshaped the entire future of Southern California. In 2003, after years of negotiations forced by federal pressure to reduce California's overuse of its Colorado River allocation, the state completed the Quantification Settlement Agreement, a deal redistributing water among the Imperial Irrigation District, the San Diego County Water Authority, the Coachella Valley Water District, and the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. The heart of the deal was a transfer of water rights from the Imperial Irrigation District to urban users, primarily San Diego, in exchange for the Irrigation District implementing water conservation measures. It was the largest agricultural-to-urban water transfer in American history at the time. It also required solving the problem of the Salton Sea, since reduced agricultural drainage flowing into the Salton Sea would cause the already troubled inland lake to shrink and expose toxic dust. The state of California committed to addressing the Salton Sea as part of the deal, a commitment that has been only partially fulfilled in the 2 decades since. The 2003 agreement demonstrated that water reallocation was possible, but also that every solution creates new problems. Fact number 4. The river inspired the legal concept of the public trust doctrine's most aggressive application in American history. In 1983, the California Supreme Court issued a landmark ruling in the case National Audubon Society versus Superior Court, a case arising not from the Colorado River itself, but from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power's diversions from the tributaries feeding Mono Lake, which had been reducing the lake to a saline catastrophe. The ruling held that the public trust doctrine, the legal principle that certain resources are held by the government in trust for the public, applied to water rights and could be used to protect navigable waters and their ecosystems even against previously granted water rights. This legal revolution rippled outward. It strengthened the legal foundation for environmental water rights throughout the American West, including along the Colorado River. Subsequent litigation and legislation drawing on the Mono Lake precedent has shaped how courts and regulators think about environmental flows, the water that must stay in a river to maintain its ecological functions. Without the Mono Lake case, the legal tools for arguing that the Colorado River needs some water left in it for nature would be considerably weaker. Fact number 3. The Grand Canyon remains one of the most geologically complete records of Earth's history anywhere on the planet. Stand at the rim of the Grand Canyon and look down. The rocks exposed in sequence from the rim to the river bottom represent nearly 2 billion years of Earth's history, almost half the age of the planet itself. Each layer is a chapter: Cambrian seas, Devonian reefs, ancient sand dunes turned to stone, massive lava flows. The Vishnu schist at the very bottom, dark and shining at the river's edge, crystallized deep within the Earth's crust approximately 1.7 billion years ago. The canyon is not just beautiful, it is the most legible geological textbook on the surface of the planet. Scientists studying its layers have contributed fundamentally to our understanding of plate tectonics, ancient climates, the history of life, and the formation of continents. The Colorado River is the author of this book. By spending millions of years patiently cutting through rock, it exposed a library of Earth's autobiography that no other force could have written in quite this way. And that library, that cathedral of stone and time, exists because of water, moving water, the same water that today disappears into dry sand before reaching the sea. Fact number 2. The river is now classified as one of the most endangered rivers in the United States, and has been for years. American Rivers, a national conservation organization, named the Colorado River the most endangered river in the United States in its annual report for 2007. It has appeared on the organization's list of most endangered rivers repeatedly in subsequent years. The reasons are by now familiar from this list: overallocation, drought, climate change, degraded habitat, failing to reach its mouth. But the classification carries weight beyond symbolic. It has mobilized legal challenges, conservation funding, and political attention. The river's endangered status is not a future projection, it is a present reality. Water levels in both Lake Mead and Lake Powell have triggered federal water shortage declarations, the first ever in the river's management history, beginning in 2021. Those shortage declarations triggered automatic cuts in water deliveries to Arizona, Nevada, and Mexico under pre-negotiated shortage-sharing agreements. More cuts are likely. The machinery of crisis, set in motion by a century of overallocation and now accelerated by climate change, is operating exactly as the scientists who warned about it predicted it would. The river is not slowly moving toward crisis, it is already in one. Fact number 1. The entire American Southwest story, past, present, and future, is written in water, and the water is running out. Here is where we close the circle that we opened at the start of this video. The Colorado River does not reach the sea. That fact, which sounds almost impossible when you first hear it, is the thesis of everything. A river that carved the Grand Canyon, that built one of Earth's greatest geological records, that sustained indigenous civilizations for thousands of years, that became the hydraulic foundation of an entire modern region. That river is being consumed before it can complete its journey. The agreements that govern it were built on bad data. The cities that depend on it keep growing. The climate that sustains its snowpack is warming. The farms that use most of its water operate under water rights written into law over a century ago. And yet, there are people working on this. There are tribal water settlements being reached. There are conservation agreements being made. There are researchers documenting every inch of the system. There are farmers adopting more efficient irrigation. There are cities reducing per capita water use dramatically. Las Vegas has actually cut its total water consumption over the past 20 years, despite population growth, largely through aggressive conservation programs. The river's crisis is not inevitable. It is a choice. A long series of choices made over a century, and a different series of choices that could still be made now. The Colorado River does not have to end in dry sand. But changing that ending requires understanding the truth about what happened, and almost everything you were told before tonight was only part of the story. So here's what I want to ask you. Which of these 32 facts hit you the hardest? Was it the extinct delta? The wrong numbers in the 1922 compact? The drowning of Glen Canyon? Or something else entirely? Tell me in the comments below. I genuinely read them, and the conversations there are often as illuminating as the videos themselves. If this kind of deep dive into the hidden history and real science of places you thought you knew is something you want more of, subscribing right now costs you nothing, and it means you will not miss what we have coming up next. We've got stories about the Great Salt Lake, the Mississippi River Basin, and several deep dives into river systems around the world that are all carrying some version of the same warning the Colorado is screaming right now. Thank you for watching all the way to the end of this one. It means a lot. I will see you in the next video, and until then, underneath every one of those cities, every farm field, every desert highway, there is a river that is running out of time. Take care.